I was standing barefoot in the snow on Christmas Eve when my father slammed the door behind me. Inside the house, 30 guests were laughing, drinking, celebrating like nothing had happened. And outside, I was freezing in the dark. My father had just told everyone I was a problem child who needed discipline. But what he didn't know was that in less than 10 minutes, a black limousine would pull up to the house. And the woman stepping out of it was about to destroy every lie he had built for the last 12 years. I still remember the sound of the door locking behind me. It wasn't loud. It was just a small metallic click. But somehow it felt louder than the entire Christmas party happening inside the house. I stood there on the porch barefoot, wearing nothing but a thin sweater and pajama pants. Snow was falling slowly from the sky, covering the driveway and the front yard in white. The cold air burned my lungs when I breathed. And through the big glass windows, I could see my father smiling at his guests. Like nothing had happened. Like I didn't exist. Inside the house were 30 people, business partners, neighbors, distant relatives, and a few of my father's friends who loved coming to his annual Christmas Eve party. They were drinking wine, laughing loudly, talking about investments, vacations, and success. And my father was right in the center of it all, exactly where he liked to be, the center of attention. If you had met him that night, you would have thought he was the perfect man, successful businessman, charming host, a proud father. But that version of him only existed for the people watching, not for me, because the man who had just locked me outside in freezing weather wasn't the man they believed they knew. And the worst part? All of this had started because I asked one simple question at dinner. Dinner had been perfect, at least on the surface. The long dining table was decorated with candles, gold plates, and a giant Christmas centerpiece my stepmother had spent hours arranging. Everyone was dressed elegantly, and the food smelled amazing. Turkey, mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. My father loved hosting big dinners like this. He believed they showed people how successful he had become. But while everyone else was laughing and eating, something had been bothering me the entire night. A question I had been holding in for years. And somehow, Christmas Eve felt like the only moment brave enough to ask it. So when the conversation paused for a moment, I looked at my father across the table. My heart was beating fast. But I asked anyway, "Dad, why doesn't Grandma ever come to Christmas anymore?" The entire table went silent. Forks stopped moving. Glasses paused halfway to people's lips. And my father slowly looked up from his plate. His expression changed instantly. Not surprised. Not confused. Angry. Cold. Dangerous. "Evelyn," he said slowly, his voice tight. "This is not the time for that conversation." I swallowed. "I just thought." I said, "Not now." But the problem with holding questions inside for years is that once they escape, you can't push them back in. "But she hasn't been here since I was 10, I said quietly. "And nobody ever explains why." That was when the room changed. The air felt heavier. Guests shifted in their seats. My stepmother avoided eye contact. And my father stood up from the table. Slowly. Deliberately. His chair scraped loudly across the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry about this." Then he looked directly at me. "My daughter sometimes has behavioral issues." The word hit me like a slap. Behavioral issues? I stared at him. Confused. Hurt. Embarrassed. But he wasn't done. "She struggles with respecting boundaries," he continued, shaking his head slightly like a disappointed parent. "And tonight seems to be one of those nights." A few guests nodded awkwardly. Some looked uncomfortable. But no one said anything. Because no one ever did. Then my father walked around the table and grabbed my arm. "Come with me." His grip was tight. Painfully tight. I didn't argue. I just followed him. Because I knew arguing would only make things worse. He pulled me through the kitchen. Through the hallway. Straight to the front door. Then he opened it. Cold wind rushed inside instantly. Snowflakes blew across the floor. And he pushed me outside. "Stay out here," he said. "What?" "Until you learn respect." "Dad, it's freezing." You should have thought about that before embarrassing me in front of my guests. My heart dropped. I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I just asked about Grandma. And for a second, just a second, something flashed in his eyes. Fear. But it disappeared quickly. You don't get to ask questions about things you don't understand. Then he stepped back inside and slammed the door. The lock clicked. And just like that, I was alone. First, I thought he would open the door again. Maybe after a few minutes. Maybe after the guests left the dining room. Maybe after someone asked where I went. But minutes passed, and nothing happened. Through the window, I could see the party continuing. Music started playing again. People were laughing, drinking. My father was pouring wine like nothing had happened, like I wasn't standing 10 feet away in the freezing cold. Snow started collecting on my hair and shoulders. My toes were numb. My hands were shaking. And I wrapped my arms around myself trying to keep warm. But the cold kept creeping deeper and deeper. Then something strange happened. Headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. At first, I thought it was just another guest arriving late. But the car moving slowly toward the house didn't look like the others. It was long, very long, black, shiny, a limousine, which made absolutely no sense, because my father hadn't invited anyone with a limousine. The car stopped right in front of the house, engine humming softly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the back door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was older, elegant, wrapped in a long dark coat. Her silver hair moved slightly in the winter wind, and when she looked toward the house, her eyes landed directly on me, standing barefoot in the snow. Her face changed instantly. Shock, then anger. Real anger. She walked quickly toward me. Sweetheart, why are you outside in this weather? Her voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath it. I didn't know who she was. I live here, I said quietly. Her eyes widened slightly. You live here? Yes. She turned slowly toward the house, looking at the bright lights, the party inside, the people laughing. Then she looked back at me again and asked the question that would change everything. What's your name? I hesitated for a second, then answered, Evelyn. The moment I said it, her entire body went still, like the world had just stopped. Evelyn? Her voice shook slightly. Then she whispered something that made my heart skip. My God, I've been searching for you for 12 years. For a moment, the woman just stared at me. Snow was falling around us, the cold wind brushing against my face, but she didn't seem to notice any of it. Her eyes stayed locked on mine. Did you say your name is Evelyn? She asked again. Yes, I said quietly. Her breathing slowed. Then she asked the question that made my stomach twist. Evelyn Harper? My heart skipped. That was my name. Yes. She took a small step back like she had just been hit by something invisible. Then she looked up at the house again, the bright windows, the Christmas lights, the laughter inside. And suddenly her expression changed. From shock to anger. Real anger. Your father is Daniel Harper, isn't he? I nodded slowly. Now I was the one feeling confused. How did this stranger know my name? My father's name? Why was she looking at the house like she wanted to burn it down? She took a deep breath. Then she gently took off her coat and wrapped it around my shoulders. The warmth felt incredible after standing in the snow. You shouldn't be outside, she said softly. My father locked me out. The moment those words left my mouth, something dark flashed across her face. He did what? He said I embarrassed him. Her jaw tightened. For a few seconds she didn't say anything. Then she turned toward the house. Stay here, she said calmly, and started walking toward the front door. Fast, confident, like someone who had every right to be there. I watched nervously from the porch as she reached the door and rang the bell. Inside I could see people turning their heads, confused. Another guest arriving? A few seconds later the door opened. My stepmother stood there first. Her polite host's smile appeared instantly. Yes? Can I help? Then she saw the limousine parked outside. and the elegant woman standing in front of her. Her smile widened. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize we were expecting." "I'm not here for your party," the woman said calmly. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. My stepmother blinked. "I'm looking for Daniel Harper." The name made a few nearby guests turn around. My father was standing across the living room pouring wine. When he heard his name, he looked up and saw her. The glass slipped slightly in his hand. The color drained from his face. For a moment he looked like someone who had just seen a ghost. He slowly walked toward the door, each step careful, controlled, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Margaret," he said quietly. The woman stepped inside. Snowflakes melted on the floor behind her boots. "Yes, Daniel." The room had gone silent now. 30 guests watching, waiting, confused. My father forced a small laugh. "Well, this is unexpected." "I'm sure it is." My stepmother looked between them. "You two know each other?" Margaret didn't answer. Her eyes moved around the room slowly, taking in the decorations, the expensive wine, the perfectly dressed guests. Then she spoke again. "I've spent 12 years trying to find my granddaughter." The room froze. My stepmother frowned. "Granddaughter?" My father quickly stepped forward. "That's not necessary tonight, Margaret." "Oh, I think it is." Her voice was calm, but powerful. "Because I finally found her." The guests leaned closer, sensing drama. My father's jaw tightened. "Margaret, please." "Daniel," she interrupted, her eyes sharp now. "Where is Evelyn?" The name echoed through the room, and suddenly everyone was looking around. Some guests remembered the awkward moment at dinner. The question about Grandma. My father hesitated, just for a second, but that second was enough. Margaret noticed. Her eyes narrowed. "Where is she?" "She's upstairs." "Upstairs." Margaret turned slowly toward the front window, the one facing the porch. And from where I was standing outside, I could see everything. She walked toward the window, pulled the curtain aside, and looked out. Her eyes found me immediately, standing barefoot, shivering, on the porch. For a moment she didn't move. The room behind her stayed completely silent. Then she turned back toward my father, and the look on her face made several guests step backward. "You locked her outside." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. My father's voice sounded tight. "She needed to calm down." In -12 degrees? She was being disrespectful. Margaret laughed, but there was no humor in it. Disrespectful. Then she turned to the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, would anyone here like to know why my son has been lying to all of you for the last 12 years? My father stepped forward quickly. "That's enough." But it was already too late, because curiosity had taken over the room. "What do you mean lying?" one guest asked. Margaret looked straight at him. "You've all been told Evelyn has behavioral problems, haven't you?" A few people nodded awkwardly. "Yes," someone said. "That's not the truth." My father's voice rose. "Margaret, stop." But she continued. "The truth is much simpler." She pointed toward the door. "The girl freezing outside is the only person in this house who has been telling the truth for years." My father looked furious now. "You're making a scene." "Yes," she said calmly. "And I'm just getting started." Then she walked toward the door, opened it, and stepped outside again. The cold air rushed into the house. Guests gasped when they saw me standing there barefoot in the snow. Margaret gently took my hand. "Come inside, Evelyn." My legs were shaking as I stepped into the warm living room. 30 pairs of eyes stared at me. Some shocked, some embarrassed, some angry, but none of them were laughing anymore. Margaret looked around the room. Then she said something that made my father turn pale. "Tonight, Daniel, we're finally going to tell everyone the truth about what you did 12 years ago." And suddenly, the Christmas party didn't feel like a celebration anymore. Felt like a courtroom. And my father was about to be put on trial. The moment I stepped inside, the warmth hit my skin so suddenly that it almost hurt. My toes were numb. My hands were shaking. and 30 people were staring at me like they had just realized something was terribly wrong. Margaret kept one hand gently on my shoulder. A quiet gesture. But it made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore. My father stood across the room. His face was tight, angry. But underneath that anger, I could see something else. Fear. Real fear. Margaret turned toward him slowly. "Well, Daniel," she said calmly. "Shall we tell them?" My father's voice came out low. "This isn't the place for family drama." "Oh, I disagree." She looked around the room at the guests. These people deserve to know who they're celebrating tonight. The room was completely silent now. No music. No laughter. Even the fireplace crackling sounded loud. Margaret took a deep breath. Then she began. 12 years ago, she said, my granddaughter Evelyn disappeared from my life. A few guests looked confused. My son told me she had been sent away to a special behavioral program, she continued. He said she had become violent, unstable, and impossible to control. Murmurs started spreading through the room. I felt my stomach twist, because I had heard those words before. My father had told that story so many times that even some of my relatives believed it. Margaret continued. For years I tried to contact her. I sent letters, birthday cards, Christmas gifts, but none of them ever reached her. My father stepped forward suddenly. That's not true. Margaret turned to him slowly. Oh, then where are they, Daniel? He didn't answer. And that silence was louder than any confession. Margaret looked back at the guests. What none of you know, she said quietly, is that Evelyn was never sent away to any program. Every eye turned toward my father. Margaret's voice became sharper now. She lived right here. In this house. But Daniel made sure she stayed invisible. A guest spoke up. What do you mean invisible? Margaret looked directly at them. I mean he controlled every story anyone heard about her. He told teachers she had emotional issues. He told relatives she had behavioral problems. And he told me she didn't want to see me anymore. My heart felt heavy hearing it all out loud. Because it was true. All of it. I had grown up watching people believe lies about me. Watching adults look at me with pity or suspicion. But Margaret wasn't finished. Then she said something that changed the entire room. The real reason Daniel pushed Evelyn away is because she knew something. My father snapped. That's enough. But Margaret didn't stop. She knew what really happened the night her mother died. The words felt like thunder in the room. My chest tightened. Because that night had always been a shadow in my life. I was 10 years old when my mother died. Everyone said it was an accident. A car crash on a snowy road. But even as a child, something about that night never felt right. Margaret continued quietly. Evelyn told me years ago that her parents were arguing the night of the accident. My father's face had turned pale now. She told me Daniel left the house angry and drove after her mother. The room was frozen. And according to the police report, Margaret said slowly, Daniel's car was found just 2 miles from the crash site. Gasps spread across the room. My father's voice came out strained. You're twisting facts. Am I? Margaret pulled a folded document from her purse. I reopened the investigation last year. The room exploded with whispers. You what? She held the document up. Turns out the original case was closed very quickly. Too quickly. Several details were never properly examined. My father's voice rose. You're accusing me of killing my own wife? Margaret's eyes were cold now. I'm saying the truth was buried. And the only person who kept asking questions. She placed her hand gently on my shoulder. Was Evelyn. Tears burned in my eyes. Because suddenly everything made sense. The anger, the silence, the punishments, the lies. My father hadn't hated me for being difficult. He had feared me for knowing too much. One of the guests finally spoke. Daniel, is any of this true? My father looked around the room. 30 faces. All watching him. Waiting. Judging. And for the first time in my life, he looked small. I think this party is over, he muttered. But no one moved. Margaret stepped closer. No, Daniel. This conversation is just beginning. Then she turned to me. Her voice softened instantly. Evelyn, there's something else you should know. I wiped my eyes. What? She smiled gently. I never stopped searching for you. For 12 years. And when I finally found you, I made a decision. She reached into her purse again and pulled out another envelope. Inside was a document. She handed it to me. What is this? A legal transfer. My heart started racing. Of what? Margaret looked straight at my father. Everything. Gasps filled the room again. The Harper estate, she said calmly. The company shares. The trust funds. All of it now belongs to Evelyn. My father's face went white. You can't do that. I already did. She turned back to me. You deserve the life that was stolen from you. I couldn't speak. My hands were shaking too much to even hold the papers. Then Margaret said something softly. Something only I could hear. You're not alone anymore. And for the first time in years, I believed it. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful real-life style stories like this. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged or misunderstood by your own family before the truth came out? Your story might help someone else feel less alone.